In 1958, Britain was still reeling from the war. Having returned home to his family company, J.W. Foster and Sons, Joe and his brother Jeff knew that the shoe business they were set to inherit was failing. My guest today is Joe Foster, who along with his brother Jeff founded Reebok. Welcome to Not Another Business podcast with me, Toby Goodman. In a world where we can all run media companies from our phones, I often think of Joe in this conversation recorded back in 2022 around the publication of his brilliant autobiography, Shoemaker. I wonder how much of this noise we need, how much we use tech solutions to avoid fully engaging with what, as you'll hear, Joe would call the challenge. Joe makes me think about the theory of constraints because, after all, Reebok was built in post-war Britain before the internet. When he sold Reebok to Adidas, it was a globally recognized brand worth $4 billion. I'm happy to report, since this recording, Joe is still traveling the world, working with my friend and the man who introduced me to him, Steve Foster, no relation. Thanks, Steve. And recently, Joe celebrated his 90th birthday. There is so much to learn from Joe's mindset and life, so I hope you enjoy this as much as I did. If you're in business and identify as pod curious, or your podcast isn't working out the way you'd hoped, I've got more for you, including episodes, my best-selling book, Narrow Podcasting, and Profitable Pod Method Skills Sessions. For all that and more about how I can support your business, head over to narrowpodcasting.com. Now, Joe, there's a chapter in your book, Shoemaker, called Showdown.
Okay.
The chapter starts with you stitching a shoe together before walking into your father's office and telling him that you and your brother Jeff are leaving the family business to set up what ultimately became Reebok. And during that showdown, your father hands you a blade and essentially says, "You may as well stab me in the back now." And you also communicate that you have the feeling that he solely blamed you. And in that moment, you say in the book, you were liberated yourself, you liberated yourself from the chains of convention. And so my question, as you reflect back, is where did you find that drive?
Well, it's really hard to say, isn't it? You know, you're faced with a problem, and Jeff and I had been faced with this problem for probably 2 years. And that's after coming out. We did national service. You know, before national service, we just sort of doing what you normally do around your area with friends and whatever. You did the normal things. But 2 years away in national service, you just take a different perspective to life. You learn how to look after yourself. You learn that nobody else is going to do it. You have to do it. And in that case, when we came back, to the J.W. Foster business, now run by my father and uncle, who didn't speak to each other. This was the reason the company was sort of failing. You know, we tried, Jeff and I tried, but probably I tried harder than Jeff, because I was probably the more outspoken one. And so if there's anything, you go and do it, Joe. You know, you do it. So, okay, I was probably the most outspoken one. So that's why I got the blame. I got the blame when we did go that I'd taken Jeff. I'd convinced Jeff he got to leave the company and we got to go. No matter what, even if Jeff said, no, we're both together with this. You know, they wanted to, father wanted to blame me. I think he just wanted to, for whatever reason. I think maybe that goes back a long time to when I refused to be a runner. He wanted me to be a runner, and I had to go out training and doing things. And I'm a youngster. I'm a kid. You know, it's like, no, I don't want to do this. And eventually I sort of, I just said, no, I want to be out with the guys playing football. I don't want to be a runner. So I think he, in a way, probably turned his back on me at that point because I had let him down. But, you know, that's only a supposition. We never had the argument. We never had the discussion. Because eventually he did come round to the fact we were two or 3 years into the business. And in fact, we changed our name from Mercury to Reebok. So it must have been well over 2 years. But I got the blame, and yes, he did. He did hand me a letter opener. I said those were his words, "Stand me now," and it's like I can remember it. I mean, those sort of events you remember 20 years like forever. But um, I don't think mother blamed me over much. But yes, father blamed me.
But your drive was that was coming just through pent up anxiety or but pent up sort of stress that the business wasn't working because your uncle and your dad weren't talking, and you'd also had some time away from home because of the army. So you'd found your own sense of self, right?
Well, yes, it was very obvious when we came back. Your father and the uncle are just not talking. They're 50-50 in a business, which you would normally, and I was told, my father said, look, when he's gone, your uncle and I've gone, this business will be yours. Do what you like with it.
Mm.
And I sort of say, I'm sorry, Dad. We don't want you to go. That's not the plan. The plan is this business is going. This business will be dead long before you are. And indeed, it did. It did die. Well, my uncle died probably 2 years after we left, and the business, it went at the same time because my father was not really ready to just carry it on. Plus the fact the local council had a compulsory purchase order on the building. They were going to knock it down to build Bolton University there. So they sort of pushed him to sort of close the business. But yeah, I think when it comes to the drive was, look, we're young. We need a future.
Mm.
And we're going to leave. What can go wrong?
Awesome.
And so that probably drove Jeff and myself to, and it was good having somebody to talk with. On my own, I don't know, but that wasn't a question. But with Jeff, well, yes, we could do it.
Well, thank you for that. So then you grew Reebok to become the #1 sports brand, and you did it before the internet. So thinking about your first trip out of the UK to mainland Europe and later the US, Hong Kong, Far East, buying a mobile home in France isn't a strategy I'd heard of until I read your book. So wondering what moments helped you understand you could run a global business?
Well, I mean, I think, when people ask me what's the most important thing in running a business, and for me, the answer is always fun. You got to have fun. And I guess a mobile caravan down in the south of France was a bit of fun. It helps sort of take your mind off, well, you've got to do this, but we could buy a caravan. We could have holidays in the south of France. Why don't we do that? So it wasn't going to break the company, but it was going to give us somewhere to go and enjoy. And we enjoyed the south of France when we enjoyed the caravan, even though we did say it was our sort of office in Europe. Because in those days, you had to justify spending money. You couldn't just take money out of the country, which was, I had to have it in my passport. It had to be stamped in. If I went abroad, how much money are you taking? And I still have those passports. So we had to justify it. I don't think anybody looked that carefully or closely at why we were spending the money. But yes, we bought a caravan in the south of France.
Yeah, I love that. And then eventually you get to travel over to the US. Were there conversations that you had in the US where you realized they were taking you seriously and that this was a real business that could go beyond the UK?
Well, I think the experience at Foster's had been exporting to Yale University. And they were doing 200 pairs of hand-sewn shoes every month. By the time they went out of business, the guys at Yale, that was Bob G and Jack and Frank Ryan, they were getting on a bit. I think they were ready, if they're not already retired as head coaches. So they were not ready to take on Reebok. but I knew the business was there. I knew that every university, every college had coach, and coach, he was God in these places. And you could go to college on a sports scholarship. So sport was big in America, and we had about 65 million people in the UK, 350 million in the USA. We did a check on sort of available money, money to spend. How much would you spend in America? And we put America at 100. The UK came in at about 15 by comparison. And I think Germany was about 25 and Japan about 30. So, those are this is the big market. And, basically they speak English. And that makes it easier when you go into these shows that you're going to be able to speak to everybody. You don't have to have an interpreter or whatever. Plus, different Europe. Why didn't we go to Europe? It's on your doorstep. Well, Adidas and Puma were big. We were small. We were just a small business. And 27 languages or so, different cultures. What they have in Scandinavia, I guess what they have in Italy, totally different. One's into cotton, the other one's more into fleeces. And so America, that was the decision. That was the market. And okay, did they take me seriously? Yes, they did. And I suppose you read the words on that first 1968 visit to America, where the Americans loved the product, but the idea that they had to buy them out of England, that was the thing that put them off. No. And yet Bob Brigham, who I went with, he was in the outdoor market. He managed to sell some rock climbing boots. But I think it's because the outdoor market, they were sort of into buying product from Europe, skis and boots and things like that. They were well into that. But the sports stores, no, they weren't. They had Nike, they had Brooks, they had Italic, they had a lot of companies on the doorstep. They didn't need to go through the pain of importation. And it was a pain into America.
From prospective employers or partners, you frequently point to strong relationships being the key to, happy life and business. So my question is, what clues do you look for and what questions do you ask to help you decide if a relationship will be worthwhile getting into?
Well, okay. Having read the book, you'll obviously have become aware that I had 6 failed attempts.
Yeah.
So I had 6 conversations, which were very good, but if not just a conversation, you really got to get everything else right. First of all, the market has to be really ready and hungry for you. And the people that you're talking to have to be reasonably well financed. America is a big market. And I think in your conversations, you've also got to find out that they're like-minded people. They're people who want to put the effort in. They're people who are probably hungry at that time. And when we eventually got Paul Feynman, he was hungry. He needed that market. He wanted something. He wanted to change his life. Just weird, the same way that we had wanted to get out of J.W. Foster and set up originally Mercury and then Reebok. He wanted to do something different than his Boston camping company. He was in there, and so we had a nature which was very much the same. He was hungry to move on. We needed to move on. So when you find like-minded people who are not just sort of asking questions about how much does this cost, how we're going to finance it, you've got to have a personality that you can work with. And that was Paul. The other guys, yes, I could work with them, but other things weren't in place. And I mean, the thing that got us in was that 5-star shoe. Yeah, Runner's World. Everybody with it. There must have been 35 million Americans reading Runner's World. And, that alone, when people are reading that magazine and you get a 5-star shoe, that's impressive. And that's what, in fact, Paul Feynman, I don't think Paul Feynman would have come with us if we hadn't got that 5-star shoe, because that was his one demand is, look, Joe, if you get a 5-star shoe, I'm your distributor. So, that was our parting sort of conversation in Chicago in 1979 in February. So, and it worked. It worked because we got 5 stars, and he was hungry.
So what was it about Paul that you liked? Because I imagine if you got a 5-star shoe, you probably could have picked, had a pick of a few people at that point, and they would have been open to doing, at least trying to have an agreement with you for some amount of time. What was it about his personality that you felt, okay, this is a guy that I could spend some considerable time working with?
Yeah, well, he was easygoing. He was sort of honest, upfront. Don't really like what we're doing now at Boston Camping. It's okay, but we've been doing the same business for 10 years. And he just wanted, he could see, and he was hungry. Now, I think a lot of the people, like Kmart wanted 25,000 pairs. Yeah, well, they would have bought 25,000 pairs, even without the 5 stars. But that might have been my first and my last 25,000 pairs. Because you just look around and, all of a sudden you're looking at a guy who's looking at square footage. Right, how many square feet will we give this Reebok brand? Okay, we'll give them 10 square feet. Now, if we don't make enough money for that 10 square feet, then we've got to move on to another product. So how are we trying to build a brand? We had a passion there. No passion with Kmart. That was pure simply a business proposition. We'll buy the product, we'll sell it. If it sells well, we're with you. But they want to build the brand. So with Paul, it was more of he wanted to do something, not just sell a product. This wasn't just a matter of saying, well, no, he needed something. He wanted that. He had the same ambition. Well, where are we going? We don't know, but we're going to go. So those early feelings of we're going in the same direction. We're all pulling in the same direction. And he had a lot of challenges. There were some big challenges. Product wasn't right. It took us a while to get that product out of South Korea.
Yeah, so he had a patience as well that perhaps the bigger players might not have had.
Well, yeah, I do know that during those months when he had his little office there and his sort of place for storing shoes, he also had a Pac-Man machine. And he used to spend more time on his Pac-Man machine, I suppose, really just to get rid of the annoyance that the stuff isn't arriving. But, yeah, well, fortunately, he had the patience to stay with it. And then once we really got it rolling, it just moved very fast.
The other side of that question around strong relationships that I wanted to ask you about was hiring, because you've hired a number of people in your life. How do you know when you've hired a good one, and what kind of questions do you ask when you're trying to build a team?
Well, I think luckily we were in quite a glamorous business, sport and sports footwear. And in those days, quite glamorous and very sort of in your face, something, you're not just making a widget and that fits into something. And I need to make 10 million widgets next week. We had a product. And so what you're really selling is the idea, the brand, and your enthusiasm. And what I found is that we started to develop a culture, which was a winning culture, a culture of people. Well, it's great to be part of this brand. And with a shoe, it's 3-dimensional. It has 3 dimensions. With apparel, with a shirt, whatever it is, it hangs on a hanger and doesn't have that feel, that sort of, it's flat. You've got to put it on somebody to really see what it looks like. Whereas a shoe, you can just put it there and you can go around it and see it and you can feel it. So footwear, and sports footwear in particular, is something very tactile, something you can pick up and enjoy. It's light in weight. It bends nicely. It's something you can really feel. It's great. So you get that. So when employing people, I found most of the people, as Paul Fireman, he came to me. I had a stand. He came to the stand. And I found a lot of people, and okay, a lot of people would come to a stand. A lot of people would come from that. And a lot of athletes used to come to our place where we are manufacturing, come in, and they were so enthusiastic that they wanted to join the company. And once you could feel that enthusiasm, great. Most people were employed eventually in America, but they built a team. And again, we grew from almost 0 to 1 billion in 5 years. Now that means, everybody's working hard, running fast. You don't think too much. It just sucks people in, and the right people, because they want to be part of that tremendous growth. And, I suppose if we'd have grown sort of incrementally and, would have just moved in little steps, that would have been a different company altogether and different thinking maybe. Trying to find people who would generate the business. Women generated our business. When it took off, it just took off. And it wasn't a matter of where did we get our next sale from? It was a matter of where did we get our next pair of shoes to satisfy these sales? Because for those 5 years, we were just chasing the numbers, just trying to supply. So for us, it was a 5-year supply job. Instead of being a sales job, it was a supply job. So people coming in were just, they were seeing this company just grow so big, so fast. So employing people, yes. The one thing I try to avoid is egos. And, you do definitely attract the egos. So it's something to try to make sure that just a minute, an ego wants to put themselves in front of the brand. Nobody knows who Joe Foster was. Very few people knew Joe Foster, but they all knew Reebok, because for me, it's the brand. We're going after the brand. And so Joe Foster, with Jeff, we founded the brand, but it was the brand that people would come into work with, not Joe Foster.
And that enabled you to have some semblance of personal and private life that you wouldn't have been able to have had you been, Branson style on all the posters.
Well, yes. I mean, it's, Branson was sort of selling himself at the same time. And now, I've got to admit, I'm selling myself now, because we have a book, which is totally different. And Shoemaker, it's by Joe Foster. It's not by Reebok, it's by Joe Foster. So it's my story of what my experience was, and Jeff as well, as far as I include him, because unfortunately, of course, as you probably picked up, he died just when we got Paul Fireman. We're a few months in with Paul Fireman. We're probably 9 months in with Paul Fireman, but that's just the start area. And unfortunately, he had cancer and he died with it, which is, at that time, it probably made me double down harder to make sure that we succeeded. But it's a great tragedy. It really is. And if people say, what would you change? If I could, I would change the fact that he died at that time. Everything else, we became number one.
Thank you. So, business, it seems to be so much more than money to you, or despite the fact that you made $1 billion in 5 years. That's pretty amazing. You wanted to create a shoe that served athletes, and by doing just that, the retailers couldn't ignore that product. And could you share a little bit about how you got those athletes the shoes in the first place, and later other partners on board with that mission? I feel like you've probably shared some of it just by talking about the brand as you did just then, but yeah, these strategies that you were using, especially we're talking before social media. There's still a story in your book about a sales guy that just stopped showing up. All of this stuff before you got into the big leagues. So you have an incredible knack of enabling people to to work, and to help you even before the money. So I'm just interested in that part as well. If you could tell me any memories from getting these athletes to wear, try, and then eventually help you sell.
Well, I guess when we were growing, we knew, well, everybody knows that the way that you know, a Nike and Adidas, they just put a lot of money in shoes and got people to wear shoes. And so money made a big difference. And it makes even more difference these days. So you buy your athletes, you buy your influencers. And I had a friend who thought he could do it differently, that he was trying to sell on value for money because Adidas would be probably 20% more expensive than his product. But he didn't succeed. It was value for money. The product was every bit as good as a Nike or an Adidas, maybe even better. But selling it on value for money, the message didn't travel. Right, value for money, that sounds all right. But people wanted influencers, and they want to be influenced. If an athlete, a footballer, whatever, is wearing a certain product, that's the influence. So there was no real way of changing that. So we had Ron Hill, we had numerous athletes, David Jenkins, in fact, David Jenkins was quite good because he actually won the American 400-meter championship, and he was British, but he won the American. And so these things, they help. Plus you've got to advertise. We had Donna Hartley. I don't know if you ever remember Donna Hartley. So they were influencers. They were good. We had quite a nice group. Alan Pascoe, who was also, and this was round about the time when we were sort of making waves, round about the late 70s, when things were happening. And people like Ron Hill, he won the Boston Marathon, and he won it in record time. So these are the influences, and you can't change that. You just hope that you get the right ones. You just hope that it works a little bit. But the biggest influence for us was to get 5 stars. That was the big influence, because Bob Anderson, who published Runner's World, he grew it right from the late 60s all the way through the 70s. And I say by about 1975, when he started to, he was so big that he decided he could tell everybody which was the number one shoe. And of course, it was Nike. Well, they're pretty close together on the same West Coast. So he had a big influence on running, because it's not athletics anymore. Right now, it's jogging, it's running, people out on the street training. And this is where volume comes into it, because you can sell so many to performing athletes, but really big volume is street. And we're all on street now. We're all fashion companies now. So it's been those trends and changes that have helped Reebok grow. And of course, the big one was aerobics. We were a little tiny company, a $9 million company, when Angel Martinez came across, his wife was doing aerobics. And that was a big change. We're a small company. Adidas was big. Nike was big. They were male. They were sweaty. All of a sudden, we come up with a woman's aerobic shoe, a woman's dancing shoe. So we became that nice. We didn't sweat. We just glowed. We were brilliant. And it worked for us. Yeah. So there are so many things that in life you sort of take the opportunity. I think today you call it pivoting. We pivoted from being a running company to a woman's exercise, a dance company, or more or less a fitness company. And women grew us up. That a tremendous growth was on the fact that women had found something for themselves, and we actually made it just for them. We only made it in women's sizes. We made it on a woman's last, and everything was focused on that woman's and aerobics. The men wanted shoes, but it took a while before we gave in and started to make men's shoes in that nice soft leather. And I think Reebok, and this came from America, Reebok were responsible for making athletic shoes in very soft material, soft leather. Now everybody does it. If you want to really sell a nice athletic shoe, you make it soft and comfortable.
Yeah, and I remember them well in the gyms of Hertfordshire in the 90s,
Right.
80s, you know. Um, you still travel a great deal. I've come to sort of notice this. You've written your book. You don't have to travel. We're having a chat on Zoom, and that's fantastic. How important do you feel in-person conversations, in-person meetings still are today? And, you know, this is post being locked up in our houses for the best part of 2 years after COVID as well. How important are these in-person moments, meetings?
Well, I think you can do so much with a Zoom, but if we go really way back, even telephones were difficult because telephones were landlines. And if I wanted to telephone somebody, say from Italy and back to the office, yeah, we'd have to go through an operator. And an operator would probably come back and say, I'm sorry, the lines are busy. We'll call you back. So you could be waiting for a long time. And you had to wait in your room because you didn't have mobiles. We didn't have cell phones or anything like that. You know, so everything was really sort of depending upon if you could get a call through. Writing a letter was almost impossible when you're talking about doing business abroad. I think one of the reasons I failed in America on my first time, probably the second or third attempt, I was with this guy for about 4 years trying to make it work. We were writing letters. And, you know, he was answering a letter as we were writing a second letter. So we got all mixed up about, you know, well, what is he talking about now? Which letter is he responding to? And it was a bit of a torment. So really meeting people. Now, I think what people like to do, we can do this on a Zoom, but if we have a lot of people in the room, and we've done London Business School and a couple of universities, and usually the MBAs or the executive MBAs that we go and address. And, you know, the first thing they sort of learn from this is that they're asked, okay, first of all, make your exit plan. Let's see, what is your exit plan? You know, you get an exit. And they asked me and say, what was your exit plan, Joe? And we didn't have an exit plan. There was no such thing as an exit plan. We wanted to build a brand. We weren't interested in just making money or just being a successful 5 years or whatever. You know, we did have that feeling. So it gets attention, and then we start getting questions similar to yourself. Why did you do this? What happened? When? You know, we all have computers now. We all have these cell phones. I've got to say cell phone because they won't understand me in American if I say more.
Well, and I appreciate that because, you know, I deal with a lot of Americans.
But so we didn't have all these. In fact, we didn't have them until I'd retired. And I'm sitting back in Tenerife, enjoying a bit of sun and a bit of relaxation. In those early days, first retirement, the phone was ringing all the time, asking me what happened. How did this happen? It's surprising that when, you know, you think everybody knows everything, but suddenly questions come up. You know, we had questions from the IRS in America. Why is the American company paying the British company a royalty now? How did that start? What was your conversation like with Paul Fireman? And this came through my office. The office phoned me in Tenerife, and I phoned the Americans, and the Americans said, "Don't answer that question. Don't answer." And so, okay, I'm sitting back and I'm looking at Google and I'm looking at Wikipedia, and they're telling me this is how Reebok started. No. There's also a photograph of Joe Foster, founder of Reebok. Don't know who it is. He might have been called Joe Foster. He certainly was not a founder of Reebok. And so that convinced me I should write the story. So now, you know, that's my mission right now. I've got a challenge back. The challenge is to sell the book. And it's working. So I think the question started on travel. So now
Yeah, travel and just yeah, it did, and that's just all brilliant. Just every, you know, almost every line of that book, I'm thinking this guy didn't have the internet or a mobile phone or any of these, you know, during any of this,
Right.
and now you are here and you're really involved in, as an ambassador for Steve's project for One Golden Nugget, and you really embraced online and Zoom and all of that, but you are still traveling and going to places. So the second part of that conversation was, you obviously place great value in being in a room with people.
I think so. I think for people to actually feel what you feel, it's got to be face to face. This is great. And yeah, we can express ourselves as much as possible. But I think when you're in there and people are listening and people are asking questions, okay, we have to have an audience with you now and let them ask questions. And we do this on occasions, but it doesn't seem to work that well because you can't see the person who's doing the question. It's never the same as sitting there or even talking to some people. And we now are very privileged because we can now talk to a lot of ex-Reebok people, a lot of ex-Nike people, and a lot of ex-Adidas people. And we can compare notes, and we find it very interesting. We were over in Ireland in about 8 days' time. There's a big gathering together of certain wealthy people coming together for a bit of networking and chatting. In fact, we've been invited by the president of the Irish Chamber of Commerce in Mexico. So he's over back in Ireland and we're invited to this event. So that's one. And then we travel off to Boston and I shall be meeting up with some of the people now at Reebok because Reebok has changed, of course. It's no longer with Adidas. It's now with ABG, Authentic Brands. So we're going to see what they're doing, how we can help, and hopefully how they can help maybe sell my book.
Quite right too. I would hope that it would be everywhere in stores you can buy these shoes, because I think it really just adds to the feeling of owning a pair, It's such a great book, and I'm so glad, having read Phil Knight's book and reading yours, and being a Brit and knowing the north of England as I do, I just felt, yeah, like this is a completely different journey to what it is to build a brand, and that it came from the north of England, and from a town and from the kinds of people that, do what we always do, and to watch how and to read how you moved it in the way you did was just, incredibly inspiring. So I'm so privileged to speak to you, and thank you so much, Joe.
It's been an absolute pleasure. It really has. And yes, what we're doing now is, like I say, we're trying to get this to be a number one or a bestseller in America. And that's a challenge. Reebok stopped being a challenge when it became 4 billion. And I'm just becoming an ambassador, waving a flag, doing all those things. But it's a pleasure. Fantastic.
Thank you. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, please give it a 5-star review and share it with someone you think it would help. If you're a business owner considering podcasting, or you're not getting the results you wanted from the podcast you have, I've got more episodes, a best-selling book, Narrow Podcasting, and Profitable Pod Method skills sessions, all designed to help you where you are right now. For all of that and how I can support your business, head over to narrowpodcasting.com.